One of the things we talk about in Desert Pencil is something called adulting. And so adulting is really synonymous with having a basic estate plan, the basic paperwork that you need to have to preserve your wealth and also to ensure proper cessation when you pass away. This isn't a complete lecture, but it gives you the building blocks to understand at least the basics. Someday you're going to die. It's true. And all your clients are going to die too, okay? So just a quick survey by show of hands in the affirmative, this is true for you. When I go to the next place, whatever I think that is, I do not want to leave the people behind me with a bunch of drama, grief, and hassles. Good. Every hand should go up. All right. So before I get into my suggested shopping list, I'm just going to give you a couple of stories from my life, just to give you context about what I'm going to talk about next. So as I said yesterday, last time I saw my dad, he was laying down on the floor. He's 53. And I didn't know much about my parents' money. I just didn't. And then I found out later that my dad was almost broke. And he was not, he was an upper middle class guy, went to Stanford, the whole deal, just that's what it was. The good news was my dad was a life insurance salesman. And he left my mother almost $1 million. And this was in 87, 88. Over the course of the next 7 years, my mother got married again about a year later. I was saying this morning to a guy who the Utah Division of Real Estate prevents me from really describing how I feel about him. Okay? But you get my drift, okay? 7 years later, my mother was dying of liver cancer because she was a chronic alcoholic. And she was in a divorce. And I went to call her attorney one day, great attorney, love this woman. And I said, hey, it's me, and I know I'm supposed to breach attorney-client privilege, but some stuff you probably know. My mom doesn't have a huge estate because the guy who the Utah Division of Real Estate, my future won't be described adequately, has absconded with a fair amount of it. However, she's got some left and she cares about where it goes, and she doesn't have an estate plan. So the attorney said, Roger, and they went about doing what one does, and I'll talk about that here shortly. And that was important because the morning after she passed away, she had been at the funeral home for 8 hours. I get a knock on the door. They lived in Palm Springs. I was at her house. And it was her future ex-husband. And he was dressed in his little chapeau and his briefcase. I can still see him stand there. And he hands me this set of papers, and he says to me, this is your mother's will. And he doesn't know what we've done last month, clearly. And it was so funny, and I'm not kidding you. It was printed on one of those, remember those little daisy wheel matrix printers with the tractor feeds from the 80s, right? This is her last will and testament. So I kind of look at it, I'm like, okay, whatever, and it's not signed. And he says to me, well, I get everything. And I'm thinking, oh, you didn't get the memo, did you? So anyway, fortunately, he chose to leave of his own recognizance because said the other way he could leave was by ambulance, but he left. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. Third story. About 10 years ago, something like that, he was my brother-in-law at the time. He was about 35 and he committed suicide by way of OxyContin. And he had no papers, so he died what's called intestate, meaning he has no papers. And he was in Seattle. They put him into a medically induced coma, stayed there for a week. And if that's not stress on the family, I don't know what is. And his life ended with me sitting at his bedside, holding his mother's hand. They pulled the plug, and I watched him take his last breath. Okay? So, isn't that a great way to start a Friday morning? I mean, thanks for showing up, right? Okay, so all that said, I've learned in my life that each of us and our clients should have some level of estate planning, okay? And some of you might have already done this. If you have, good for you. But I'm still going to say what I'm going to say, all right? Some documents that everybody should have, and I've been in many conversations with clients where I've been consulting for trusts that have a lot of stuff in them. And the first thing I say is, do you have your paperwork together? No? Okay. We don't do anything until you get your paperwork together because it's so important. All right. So the first thing you might want to think about getting is called a will. All right? And I'm going to contrast this against something else. This would be a testamentary will. Versus a living will, which is a form of trust. And I'm going to try to be cool with my people on my left because I get it. I'm going to spin a lot today. All right, so what's the difference between these two? Okay, So when you have one of these, just a regular standard will, what happens is your estate goes to what's called probate. And the reason that matters is there's a full disclosure of all your stuff that your executor or your executrix discloses, which they have to do, okay? A lot of high net worth clients don't want to have their stuff exposed to the public. Makes sense. So sometimes they can choose something called a living will or a living trust, okay? Now, important point here, two important points. One is, this is not a tax planning document. It has no what's called look-back provision. So there's other wills you can use to abate taxes. This is not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying here is what you do is you take all your stuff, like your houses, your properties, your cars, whatever, and you title them in the name of the living trust, okay? Now there's two peoples in a living trust. One is the trustee and one is the beneficiary, okay? So let's say that you decide to do this, okay? You put all your stuff in this living trust. You can be both the trustee and the beneficiary, okay? It doesn't have to be a different person. And then you have what are called successor beneficiaries. So what happens is when you pass, the trust, what's called the corpus of the trust, does not change. You just transfer the trustee's ship, if you will, to whoever you want as your successor, and then whatever else you want to have happen, okay? And that avoids probate. But it's not a tax planning document, okay? So in my mother's case, don't be sorry, I'm glad you're here. In my mother's case, we put her stuff in a living trust with a pour-over will, okay? Now let me stop here for a second. It's very important that I tell you that these documents are very state-specific. Okay, that's super important, all right? And in Park City, you're gonna have people from all over the country, okay? So just be mindful of that. Anyway, my mother's documents were from California, and so we put her stuff in a living will, and or living trust rather, and then we use what's called a pour-over will. And the reason you use a pour-over will is that you want to specifically identify what they call in the law jargon, invaders of the estate. Her future ex-husband was a potential invader of the estate. Well, he absolutely was. And so what you do is, we named him as a beneficiary and gave him $10. And that's a little legal tactic that you use to prevent someone coming back and saying, oh, she forgot, oh, she wasn't in her right mind, oh. No, she was in her right mind, you're an a-hole, and you get $10 and goodbye. Sorry, you get my point. Okay, all right. Next document. It's called a health care directive. Okay, different states call this by different names. I call it health care directive. A health care directive is the pull the plug letter. Okay? Now, if my ex-brother-in-law would have had the pull the plug letter, would have saved a whole lot of time and grief. We've also saved the state a lot of money because they're paying $25,000 a day to keep him alive. I don't care about that or not, but that was the price at that point, because I asked the doctor. When one sits down with family members and has this discussion, it's not easy. Okay, I had this discussion with my mother, who was in hospice, and my younger sister. And my younger sister was in full freak-out mode. And I said, no problem. It's what you want, Mom. I mean, you're gonna die. She's in hospice, for God's sake. So I became labeled the murderer by my sister. These are difficult conversations. It's a lot of drama, a lot of stress, just saying, okay? But this is really important, okay? You walk out that door, you don't know, right? My brother got on a motorcycle a year ago. Hour later, he's gone. You just don't know. My ex-brother-in-law, I don't think he woke up in the morning and said, well, I'm going to OD today, and we'll see what happens with that. You just don't know. So this is prudence. I strongly recommend it. Okay, last thing, I'm going to abbreviate this, POA, power of attorney, two kinds, medical and general, okay? A medical power of attorney is a sort of a mirror of a healthcare directive, but then there's general power of attorney, okay? General power of attorney is the highest level of fiduciary the law recognizes. You basically are the other person, and you have to act in sync with exactly what they want, okay? If you are ever one who is going to be nominated or suggested to be an executor, an executrix, a trustee, or have power of attorney, and I've done all four several times, let me just offer you this piece of practical advice. It's not a popularity contest. and somebody's going to hate you. So there's a bunch of kids and a bunch of money and all that, okay? And the last part of adulting that I'm going to tell you is this. Everybody has good intentions in the beginning, okay? I talked yesterday about storytelling, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. See, in Act 1, everybody's in love. The French have a saying, beginnings are beautiful. But in the end, death and divorce are about money. Okay? They just are. And I have seen the best of situations become the worst of situations because of death and money. Okay? So my advice is, the more specific and prudent each one of us can be as testators, the better off we leave the people behind us when we're gone. I told my clients this too many times. I had one estate, it's $25 million. The kids hated each other. Okay, so I'm working with the parents, said, you know what? Sell everything. Just sell it all. Pay the taxes, give them a check. I looked at this one lady, she's all upset. I said, ma'am, with respect, you're not going to be here when this happens. And that's something people don't think about. When this all goes down, you're gone. Okay. End of adulting lecture.